Now, I'm between builds at the moment. I've just finished one project and I'm getting materials and hardware together for the next one. And I thought, whilst I've got a little bit of time and I've got a little bit of break in my schedule, I'll do some of the repairs that I know are outstanding on some of my other guitars. Now, this particular one is a 1993 Japanese Fender Stratocaster in candy apple red. And this is a guitar that I used as a spare back in the days when I used to play in bands. It is known in our house as the Christmas guitar purely because of the colour, and it matches the colour scheme of the Christmas decorations. So this one tends to come out and live in the front room over the Christmas period. Over that period, because I was using it a lot more, it became obvious that the strings had been on for far too long and they just didn't really sound very nice anymore. So it came in for a restring, which is a fairly straightforward job. But also I remembered that there's an issue with the tremolo on this one, in so much as the thread in the block that the bar mounts to is completely stripped out, and while it does kind of screw in a little bit, not really, and it never tightens up and it always flops about, and when you try and use it there's so much slop that it makes it kind of untenable. So even though I don't use tremolo an awful lot, I don't like things to not be right, so I decided that I was going to do something about this. So that is going to be the first thing I sort out on this. So I will get this bar out, we'll get the bridge out and get it stripped down, and we can have a look and see what's going on. Because the bit we need to get to resides underneath the top of this bridge here. So we need to get the springs and everything out of the back, which is a fairly straightforward deal. Just need to get these screws out. And then we can disassemble the bridge and have a look and see what's going on. Now, coincidentally, a couple of weeks ago, I went to a concert in Nottingham and I met up with one of the guys that played in a band with me back in the 90s, back when this was a backup guitar. And he reminded me that it was actually the 30th anniversary coming up of the time that that band played a, for want of a better word, charity gig in Nottingham Prison. It was an idea of our, at the time, manager, Pete, as he thought it would be a really good way of getting some publicity for us. And as you can see from these press clippings, he was correct. However, it was a bit of a fraught experience. Now, I've described this as my backup guitar, and in fact, it only ever got used on one gig, and that was the prison gig. And the only reason that happened is that they told us we wouldn't have time for a sound check. We would just have a very brief period of time where we could make sure we had kind of something like the right levels and we were set up as best as we could be. So I tuned my main guitar, I put that on its stand, I tuned this guitar, at which point we had to do the very quick sound check, and then the prisoners were let out and into the kind of small auditorium that we were in. Just as the prisoners came in, the chaplain, who had organised the gig, called us all together and he said to us, "The prisoners are going to be really appreciative of you coming and playing the gig. We don't anticipate there being any trouble. But if anything happens, just drop all your equipment and run through that gate there," pointing towards the gate at the other side of the stage. Now, psychology is a funny thing, and whilst what he said was, if anything happens, what I heard was, when something happens. At this point, rational thought went out the window and I was in kind of survival mode. And it was only as we started to play the last number that I looked down and realised that I still had my spare guitar on and I hadn't taken the time to change back to my main one. So that was the only time this one actually got used in a gigging situation. But it does go to show you where your mind goes during those stressful situations. Okay, so we're ready to pull this out now. But before I do that, I just want to do some quick measurements because I know there's a chance I'm going to have to kind of buy a replacement part for this. Now, there are generally two sizes of fender bridge. You've got the one that is 52mm between E-string centres and one that measures 56mm between the E-string centres, and that's what we've got. We've got a 56mm bridge on this, which is important. But having established this, we can pull this out and we'll get this stripped down and see what we can do with it. And the first thing we need to do with this is just to whip these saddles off. Now I've prepared some little bags and labelled them up so I kind of know exactly which saddle and which string came from where. And the reason I've done that is I'd like things to go back how they came apart, but also whilst this will kind of destroy any notion of an intonation setting on this bridge, it might keep the kind of action setting something like. So if I can save myself a few minutes, I'll be happy to do so. Now this is all very dirty and we'll need a little bit of a clean up when we come to put it back together again. And at the moment that's the kind of least of our worries. Just undo these 3 screws and get the base plate off the block. And there we have the block. So those are the 6 strings that the holes go through. Those are the 3 holes that mount it onto the base plate of the tremolo. And that is the hole that our tremolo arm fits into, which is of course where we have our problem. Now, with a bit of a background in engineering and spent some time in kind of automotive environments, my initial kind of thought with this would be to put a helicoil in, which would require me to kind of drill the hole out a bit bigger and insert a threaded insert into there, which would be kind of the correct size for that. And we'd have a thread back again. However, the issue with that is you tend to have to kind of drill out quite big oversize, and this is very, very close to the side wall of this block, so can't really do that. I've looked at getting a replacement and I have 2 options. I can either spend £50 or thereabouts on a genuine Fender article, or I can buy a cheaper one, but I can only get that in the 52mm spacing. So realistically, for the quick fix that I want on here, I have to fix this block. I'm not willing to spend that kind of money. It just isn't worth it for something that I'm not going to use that often. So what I've done is I've decided to get another bar. It's a slightly different one, but it'll still work absolutely fine. It's a little bit shorter and it's not quite as bent, but apart from that, it'll work fine. But importantly, whereas this is a 5mm thread, this one is 6mm. So what I will do is I will very carefully drill out this hole slightly larger, re-tap it to 6mm, and then in theory this bar will work just fine in there. Okay, ready to go. Now the hole in this block, if I get a small drill bit, kind of only goes in that far, which is a bit of a problem because the only tap I've got kind of won't tap in as far as I'd like it to with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down. I'm going to try and avoid kind of poking out at the side of the block. At the end of the day, it really wouldn't be that much of a problem if I did. But I'm going to drill down with a smaller drill bit. This is a 4.5. I might even go at a 4mm, just to kind of open that up a little bit. And then I'll open it up again with a 4.5 before going in with the recommended drill size for the tap that I'm going to use, which will be a 5mm, and then we can take it from there. And I don't anticipate this being a really hard material, but you never know. It is as hard as you like. Try another battery in the drill. I don't really want to take this to the drill press. If I can help it, because obviously this isn't an angle. And setting it up at that angle is going to be a bit of an issue. Third time lucky with the battery. And I think that's actually getting somewhere now. I think that's pretty good. So we'll try it with a 5mm. It's typical that a threaded tremolo arm can destroy the threads in this thing, yet simultaneously it's impervious to sharp drill bits. That definitely did something. And just to make my life a little bit easier as well, obviously the clearance hole for this needs to be a little bit bigger, so I'm going to just go down the first little bit with a 6mm drill bit as well, which cut beautifully. Okay, so with that done, we can break out the tap and start to put some threads in again. And just to give ourselves a bit of a chance of success, we'll get plenty of lubrication on this as well. And the same with any kind of tapping process. Once you get it started, kind of no more than 2 turns, and then just come back a little bit, a quarter turn or so, just to break that chip off that you're forming before you go forward a bit more. I think that's in as far as we're going to go, so we'll just gently back that out. Give it a bit clean up with a cotton bud, because there's going to be loads of grunge and muck down there. And then just to make sure, I'm just going to deburr that hole by running a small countersink around it. Give that a file. Try the new bar in. And that fits lovely and tightens up to where we need it. Now what I'll also do is, you can buy a tiny little spring that goes into there, which means you don't have to tighten it right down against the threads, you're tightening it down against the spring. Fortunately, I haven't got any of those in stock at the moment, but I will get one before I kind of try and tighten this up too much further. So with that done, we're nearly ready to start reassembling all of this. However, there is a very distinct chance, as is the case, that the hole in the base plate is too small to accept the new tremolo arm, so I'll just start to open that out very slowly. It's already 5mm, so I'll go with the 5.5. And then 6mm. Which is now big enough. And a quick fettle with the deburring tool. And we're ready to rock and roll again. Okay, so I'm going to have a quick clear up, make sure I've got all of these kind of metal shards and swarf cleaned up and out of the way. We don't want those scratching up the guitar. And then we can get back to putting this all together. Assembly is just reversal of disassembly, so I probably won't film all of that because it will just be a little bit boring, to be honest. Okay, so that's the body all kind of sorted out, cleaned up nicely, the bridge is looking good, and we can once again fit the tremolo arm in. So we're pretty much ready for strings. However, you might be able to see here, this fretboard is absolutely disgusting and needs a good clean up. Now you can buy kind of fretboard cleaners, and I've used them in the past, and they do work quite well. However, my preferred tactic on something like this is I'm just going to take it's a softish plastic scraper. It's actually the other end of my glue brush. And I'm just going to use that to kind of scrape off the worst of the gunk. I mean, this is basically, it's the oil out of my fingers and some nice yummy dead skin. But I'm just going to scrape the worst of that off. I'm going to stick a load of lemon oil on there. Lemon oil actually contains all sorts of solvents, and I think if you look on the bottle it usually says something like contains petroleum distillates or something like that. So it can be used as a quite a nice cleaner as well. So we'll just give that a bit of a scrub with a toothbrush to get some of that crap out of the wood. And a quick rub up with the paper towel, and that's looking a lot better. I'm not looking to get this absolutely spotlessly clean and perfect. You can probably see there's some very nice divots developing in the fretboard from play, and there is also somewhere in the frets, but I'm not going to address that in this instance. I don't think there's any kind of need to do that. So I'll just work my way up the fretboard, get it all cleaned up, and we should be somewhere near ready for reassembly. Okay, so that's the fretboard all nicely cleaned up now, and it's had about 2 or 3 coats of oil, and it's looking and feeling an awful lot better. So I've got a set of Ernie Ball hybrid slinkies 9 to 46, which I shall chuck on like that. So the only thing left to do now really is to set this trem up. Now I want this trem to float, which means it needs to be a little bit off the body. So I've got a little bit of upwards and some downwards movement when I put the bar in. You can chase this around forever, but the way I do it, and you'll see here when I tip this up on its side, is I've got a stack of post-it notes in there which hold this block in the position I need it in, and I've got the springs backed off so that the string tension is pulling that block back against the post-it notes. And we'll just do that kind of half a turn at a time and just keep checking, and once, as we have there, that has loosened up now, so all the tension's come off that paper, so we can pull that out, and in theory that block should now remain in exactly the right position for us to have a nicely balanced trem. And there we are, pretty much ready to go. I've done the intonation. It was a very quick job. Underneath these saddles on the bridge plate, you might have seen them when I was polishing it up and working on it, but there was some very small witness marks where these adjustment screws had been contacting it over the years. So when I put it back together, I just kind of positioned those roughly aligned with those witness marks, and that made the intonation a very straightforward job. And the only other thing I did was I put a very small amount of petroleum jelly on the nut slots and where any contact with the string tree is made, and that just helps the strings run friction free in there, which will help with string bending and use of the whammy bar now that we have one. And with that, we're pretty much ready to button everything up and give it a go. We can just give this a very quick try out. And it all seems to work perfectly. So that's another one we can get back on the rack, where it can probably stay until next Christmas, when it'll be broken out as decoration again. So that's been a couple of repairs lately that I've done, rather than focusing on a build, but the new build is coming. The new build will be the next episode, which will be coming along in a couple of days' time. So don't forget to tune in for that, and you'll be able to see exactly what it is I'm going to be making next. Until then, don't forget to hit that like button if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.